Today we are going to be given equations and I'm going to ask you to graph them. So before we graph them though, it's important for us to find our amplitude, period, frequency, and phase shift to help us graph. Remember, amplitude is the number in front of the sine or the cosine, so in this case it's a 1. The frequency is the number in front of the x, so it's a 2. Period is 2 pi divided by the number in front of x, so that's going to reduce to pi. Phase shift, there is none here because I did not have to, there's no plus or minus in this particular problem. From here I'm going to set up my graph. I'll try to fit it right here. The amplitude tells you how high and low you need to get on your y-axis. So I need to get up to 1 and down to -1. The period tells you what you need to get up to on the x-axis. So I need to get up to pi. What I always do though to label my x-axis is I take the period and divide by 4. Because I want to split that into 4 equal sections. So my period divided by 4 is pi over 4. So I'm going up by pi over 4. So it'll be pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and then pi. If you have to, think of it as just fractions instead. The first one is 1/4. 1/4 plus 1/4 is 2/4. And then 3/4. And then 4/4. Follow the pattern. But you notice I did reduce when I could. And also instead of having just the numbers on top, I replaced them with the pi's. So pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and pi. There is no phase shift to deal with. So I know a normal sine graph should start at 0, 0. At my first interval, it should be up at 1, back down to 0, down to -1, and back up at pi. And then you connect your dots. And you should have one cycle there, which is what we're trying to do. And that's it. Let's keep practicing. So the next one I have amplitude, period, frequency, phase shift. Amplitude is 4, frequency is 3. Period, take 2 pi and divide by the frequency, 3. Phase shift again, there is none. So we draw our graph this time. This time my amplitude needs to get up to 4. So that's going to be my y-axis. It has to get up to 4 and down to -4. For my x-axis, you take the period and divide by 4. And that's going to give you pi over 6. If you have to, think of it as just fractions again. 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, and 4/6. But reduce when possible. So 2/6 is 1/3, 3/6 is 1/2, 4/6 is 2/3. When you go to label the x-axis, just stick the pi's in there. So pi over 6, pi over 3, pi over 2, and 2 pi over 3. Your last label on the x-axis should match your period. From there it's a sine graph again with no phase shift, so it starts at 0, 0. This time it'll go up to 4, back down to 0, 0, down to -4, and back to 2, and back to 0. So your two graphs here, they look the same since they're sketches. However, because of the labels, they are very different graphs if I were to try to put them together onto one graph. Now let's look at one with a phase shift in it, and then we're going to move on to a couple cosine ones. So, amplitude, period, frequency, phase shift. The amplitude here, remember amplitude's always positive, so we say it's a 2. Period is frequency is going to be a 1, the number in front of x. Period is 2 pi divided by 1, which is just 2 pi. This time we have a phase shift. Since it's minus pi, it means I'm moving to the right pi. So when I go to graph this, again I see my amplitude is at 2. My period is 2 pi. I'm going to take 2 pi and divide by 4. That gives me pi over 2. If it helps you, think like fractions. 1 over 2, 2 over 2, 3 over 2, 4 over 2, and reduce. So this 1 over 2 we'll just call pi over 2. 2 over 2 is a 1, so pi. 3 over 2 is 3 pi over 2. And 4 over 2 is just 2, so 2 pi. So, to label my x-axis now, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. I'm actually going to, hold on one sec, erase this arrow if possible. No, it is not letting me erase, so we're going to have to deal with that. Alright, so a sine graph usually starts at 0, 0, but I have a phase shift. My shift is to the right pi. So instead of putting my first dot at 0, 0, I'm going to move it all the way to the right pi. And then I go from that dot on. Since it was a negative 2, look back up here in the equation. Instead of going up to 2, I'm going to go down to negative 2. And then at 2 pi, I'm up at 0. What would be considered the line after 2 pi, which is 5 pi over 2, follow the pattern, would be up at 2. And then the last line, which would be 6 pi over 2, or 3 pi, would be at the 0. So with my phase shift, I had to move it right pi. However, it looks very similar to the other ones I did, except upside down because of the negative. I want to do 2 more and then leave you guys with 1. So I'll do cos 3x so we can see a cosine 1 together. The amplitude is 1. Frequency is 3. Period is 2 pi over 3, and there is no phase shift. We've already dealt with, hold on one sec, let me draw this in. Well, we've obviously dealt with our amplitude of 1, so 1 and negative 1. We've already also dealt with that period of 2 pi over 3. It's the same labels as the one above. So it's pi over 6, pi over 3, pi over 2, and 2 pi over 3. Now a cosine graph, instead of starting at 0, 0, it starts up at the amplitude. So it starts at 1 and then goes down. And then once it gets down to its lowest point, it works its way up. So this one is more of a U shape to start. That's your cosine graph. We'll do one more cosine one. Let me set this one, but you guys will finish it. In order to be able to solve this one, you've got to take that 2 outside of parentheses. And we saw this on one of your homework problems, hopefully. When you take a 2 out, of your 2 times x would give you your 2x back. 2 times pi over 2 would give you pi. So whatever number you take out, divide by that number in the second half. You guys will finish graphing that one. Usually with your period, frequency, phase shift, and then graph. That'll be your do now. I will do the last one. So amplitude on this is 3. Frequency is 1, therefore period is 2 pi. Phase shift, it's a plus pi over 4, so it's left pi over 4. Okay, I know I'm going a little quick here. I need to get up to 3, down to negative 3. I've already dealt with a 2 pi period. I know it goes pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. A cosine graph normally, well, this is a negative 3, would have started down here at the negative 3. However, it says shift it to the left, pi over 4. Left pi over 4 is between your labels. Oops, sorry, down here, not the dot I just drew. Since you went between labels, every point after this will be between your labels. So between 0 and pi over 2, you have your dot. Between pi over 2 and pi, you're up at 3. Between pi and 3 pi over 2, you're down at 0. And between 3 pi over 2 and 2 pi, you're down at -3. And then you draw your graph there. So I want you guys to try that last one. Then we'll have 6 of them to do tomorrow in class.